Good afternoon. My name is Chris Adam with Youth Pleasure Employers, and I'm delighted to be joined by Ed from Lovewell and Blake. Hello there, Ed.
Hi Chris, how are you?
Yes, I'm not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you. Another busy Monday, but no, all's good, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I'm thankful for you for finding time for me on this busy Monday to sort of come chat to me and answer a few questions. And I guess my first sort of question has to be, can you tell me about Lovewell and Blake and what it is you do?
Of course. So I am the talent I can't even say it myself, employer brand coordinator at Lovewell Blake. So I basically head up all of the recruitment. Obviously a portion of the marketing as well, all centrally focused around obviously bringing in trainees and experienced hires into Lovewell Blake. Lovell Blake, they are so to give you the technical phrase, they are the longest serving accountancy in the UK with
Oh
its
wow.
original name. So we were established in 1858. So it's 175 years this year, a lot of heritage. We're obviously central to, well, the hub is, I suppose, Great Yarmouth and Norwich, but there are other offices as well, which have a significant amount. So there's Lowestoft, Bury, Ely, we have an office in Elsham. We obviously cover a wide variety of accounts, so it could be accounts, tax, auditing, you name accountancy, we do it. And we also have a financial planners attached to the business as well.
Oh wow! I mean, so firstly, it's never easy to concisely summarise what your organisation does, well, in a concise way, and you've just done that brilliantly. So thank you, and have so much heritage and history find as you say, like nearly coming up to 200 years worth of heritage. That's fantastic. And you touched on the various different things you said there, as you say, like if it's under the accounting umbrella, you do it. What kind of different roles and people do you have within the organisation to sort of facilitate all of those different operations?
Course. So now, so for instance, for me, I sit in the HR function because of the size of the business. We're obviously supported by a range of different, I suppose, parts to it. So obviously, there's marketing, obviously administration, IT. I suppose more standardized pieces, and we all support and feed into the accounting team. So this can vary. We as a firm have different specialisms. So, for instance, as a firm, we specialize in agriculture. We have medical teams. We also have well, auditing as well, which to try and break it down. So entry routes into accounting tend to, you'll either take the AAT route. So this is if you're leaving A levels, you would join and do the AAT, which is more general accounts across the board. Most people would have probably heard of that. Or there's tax, which is, to make it complicated, the ATT, which is the completely comparative, pretty much everything the same other than your specialism being tax or sort of more general accounts. That could be accounts prep, more those basic things, if you want to say that, but filing, those kinds of pieces. If you were to potentially go on to university and study, funnily enough, any form of degree, as long as it's obviously up to sort of a 2-2, I think is the minimum we really look at. You can join on our graduate scheme. Now those join and go straight into the auditing department of where you would study the ACA. So it sort of partly depends on which bit you come from. And we're quite open. And obviously, we do that across all of the different offices. So we have trainees every single year at each individual office.
That's absolutely amazing, and it's interesting, as you say, hearing about the different routes in there, especially the fact that, yeah, joining your graduate scheme, you could have, say, a background in, I guess it could be in, sports or science or anything else, but then to suddenly think, actually, that opportunity there is really interesting. And could you just explain a little bit more to me about how you find your specialism, as you said? So you said that, mentioned there about how you've got your specialism in agriculture and area. So if someone's joining the firm, as I say, sort of how's what kind of experience can they get to help them find what is their sort of their area of interest that they want to pursue?
So obviously we do work experience. I would say that if anybody listening is interested, we genuinely tend to get full for the next year in about November of the previous year.
Oh
So we
wow.
are, yeah, and that's across all the offices. It's just because of outreach and partly because of the history. Just so many people know about us. So what I would tend to say is we'll give insight to you. So we have insight evenings. We don't limit you as well. So when you apply for the annual intake, for instance, which I'm sure we can get into if we need to,
Mhm.
when you apply for that, you basically opt into which offices are applicable for you. You make that decision. So, for instance, if you lived in, let's say, Blowfield, Brundall, and you wanted to go for Norwich and Great Yarmouth, you of course could. We leave that completely open to you. You will then be assessed by different managers who've obviously selected you to be shortlisted. Um, if multiple teams wish to offer you, we will leave that choice with you. That's probably the point where you make the biggest decision over which avenue you go down. After that point, let's say you committed to, let's use agriculture as an example. If you went into agriculture, you will get exposure to other bits in the business. So you could be seconded to maybe tax, maybe auditing. At that stage, if they perhaps felt that you were best suited of moving internally, then absolutely we want to keep good people in place. But what I tend to say is, because the apprenticeship does, it's obviously a 3.5 year process, you kind of to a degree are latched into that team probably for most of that period. But what we would say is that, again, we're quite open and transparent. If things need to be, changed, you're better suited to somewhere else within the business, then we'll absolutely make that transition. There's no issue with that at all. But it's also fair to say, because I don't want people to think that once you've done agriculture, you're going to be an accountant for farmers for life. That it's great you have that specialism, and of course that could serve you well if you really wanted to go into depth with it. But naturally, let's say for instance an opportunity came up elsewhere that was in, I don't know, a charities team, for instance. The fact that you have that agriculture specialism would make no difference whatsoever. So realistically, it's more just about giving you exposure to a particular industry, but longer term, that wouldn't have any sort of, your future isn't set in that. For instance, as long as you have the qualification that we supply, whether it be the AAT or whatever, you could then in turn move into something else. So ultimately, once you train to be accountant, the possibilities are endless.
I mean, that's really interesting, and it's good to know that, I say, the opportunities for exposure in different areas are there. And talking about other areas, when you were describing the organisation, you start talking about sort of the marketing team, sort of HR, so where you're based. And I think that if I think of sort of an accountancy firm, I don't think of those teams. If I think it's one of those organisations and sectors where people think, well, it's just a group of accountants in a corner, but you don't think, as you say, suddenly, no, there's admin, there's HR, there's marketing, those kind of things. So as I say, so sort of what are the roles of those teams there, if you see what I mean? And then are there any other sort of departments or roles within the organisation where we wouldn't know they were there unless you told us, if you see what I mean?
Trying to think of ones perhaps you wouldn't know if they were there. I mean, I would certainly say that, often with this, basically, you're very right. There are some accounting firms which are solely accountants, and that will obviously, they're probably a smaller firm, of course, because Level Blake and because of the size of it, we have different functions. So, for instance, to give you an example, for instance, I'm with an HR. I work very closely with an HR advisor. She handles a lot of the company's well-being. So for instance, one of the benefits we have is we have a day where we can go and do something for charity. It's paid and everything by the firm, so it's about investing back into the community. With that, we're also getting, so there's a benefits. It's not come out yet, so I won't say what it is. It's going to happen over the next couple of months. But there's another system that's being put in place, which is to do with well, it's ultimately benefits. So there's, I don't know, high street discounts. That could be anything from, trying to think, it could be anything from holidays to just regular supermarkets. So ultimately, the more functions that we have, it allows the accountants to do what they do best and focus on that. So you don't have to worry about, it sounds really silly, but I had a candidate actually previously where they were offered a similar AAT package with their current employer, who was just an industry-based position, or sorry, just a commercial-based business. So it was just a random company. And I said to him, there's many different things that you don't factor in when being a trainee. So for instance, we have somebody here who manages and basically heads up the learning and development. So for instance, she works with our training provider. She'll book your exams, she'll deal with them personally.
Wow.
We have mentors in place who basically support the students. So it's it's not as simple as just completing your AATs. I think there's sometimes pieces, because we all know life is busy. So if we can sort of, to a degree, offset, we sort of offset all the little pieces that the accountants don't need to really be doing, so they can focus on their job, and we're all here to sort of support them in many different ways. So obviously marketing does that. Most senior accountants do a lot of networking. Obviously marketing are a sort of a key part of that, especially within the agricultural sector. We have IT. We know what it's like when something goes wrong on one of our computers and it drives us nuts. I don't have to sit there and try and work it out. I can go straight to them, obviously. Of course, there's me within HR, and obviously the wider HR model. So, you know, if we ever have anyone with a personal problem, or anything that they really feel that they need support with, we have things in place here. We have a healthcare scheme. So those bits sort of branch out, I suppose, sort of the everyday job. And whilst you'll focus on accounting, there's different, obviously, parts of the business which support it, making it, well, hopefully a better place, but an easier place to work, at least anyway.
No, that's really, really interesting. As I say, I think if someone was looking to apply for a role, they'd probably maybe, as I say, and I say this with no disrespect, they might look at Lovewell Blake and go like, okay, I'm not an accountant. There's going to be nothing for me there. Whereas you just, as they cited, so many different roles, departments, that, as you say, all go to supporting the accountancy factor. But as I say, yeah, I wouldn't have known those were there, without you saying so. And if we take a closer look at the accountant specifically, if that's
Mm,
okay, um, I will firstly prefix this by saying that I know there's no such thing as a typical day. Throwing that right out there, no such thing exists
mm.
anywhere. But if you maybe had to look at sort of whether you want to take sort of your sort of new accountants or somebody experienced, or if you had to look at what they're doing during a day, what are the challenging parts of their day? What are the challenging tasks they're doing, and what are the good days look like? What are the rewarding parts of being in that role?
For sure. So I would say, so again, it can be really annoying here and say that it really does depend on which department you're in the business.
Yeah.
So a lot of it revolves around obviously client exposure. So you had sort of touched on it there a little bit actually. I think there's quite a misconception that obviously to be an accountant you have to be good at maths. Long gone are the days where accountants are Scrooge from Christmas, from Up a Christmas Carol. Not very friendly, that kind of stuff. It's completely the opposite. In fact, I think that being an accountant these days is very much like being an account manager. So, and what I mean by that is that it's very obviously it's a completely client centric. So whether that be you're dealing with clients, in person. I'm in a meeting room now. I see multiple clients come in all the time to do with meeting with the accountants. Um, Obviously, that could, of course, be over the phone or email. So, a lot of it, to sort of break it down, I suppose, obviously, there's things which, if you're in counts, again, that could be accounts prep, that could be doing, bits of payroll, that could be, slightly bits of bookkeeping. But ultimately, because how it works in accountants is obviously we have a range of different clients in a range of different industries. So all the accountants, unless you're in one of the specialisms I've mentioned, if you're in a particular team, it's called business services group, you obviously deal with a wide variety of clients, and that will be the same in each of them. So you'll have a pool of clients that you deal with not daily. Some of them you'll probably only deal with monthly. So you get exposure to each of those. So every day is different simply because you're not
Mhm.
dealing with the same person every single day, and a lot of the people you're dealing with are clients of ours who obviously you're not sat next to. So there can be different things. Like I say, you've obviously got payroll, you've got bits of bookkeeping, you've got bits of accounts preparation. Ultimately, that is also determined by how far along you are in your studies. Because of course, if you're at a trainee level, we don't drop you in the deep end. Whilst you will get some client exposure, there's a lot of things which, so we pay for study leave, for instance. So there's some days where you'll be at home and you'll be completely obviously training. There's some days you'll be at our learning provider in Norwich, obviously learning there. So that will probably be 3.5 years. But yeah, ultimately, it's really difficult to say because it's good just because there's different specialisms and whatnot. And it will depend on the managerial level that you're at, and obviously as that goes further up, there'll be more and more to do with supporting your peers. But yeah, a lot of it's to do with, like I say, accounts prep. Could be doing a bit of tax, could be doing a bit of obviously even just filing, and like I say, bookkeeping and payroll, more sort of uh, less advanced parts, I suppose, of the accounting role, at least initially. And then on from that upwards. And then again, each week won't be the same because they'll have days where they're not even doing the job. They'll either be studying by themselves with support, but in their own time, or they'll obviously be studying, obviously, our learning provider as well.
You touched at the beginning of the answer about how, as say, there's this horror stereotype, as you said, around sort of cats being Scrooge-like characters. No need for people skills as long as they're good at maths, if you see what I mean. Whereas, as
Mhm.
I say, I find it interesting that you compare the role to an account manager. So if we take away the kind of skills they will learn through, some of the ways you described there, um, if you've got someone who's considering this sort of career path, what kind of soft skills do they need? Do they need sort of to be a good communicator? Do they need to be positive? So what kind of traits do they need before they even get the sort of, as I say, the knowledge drilled into them?
So we do. I think I'd mentioned obviously we do assessment days, and this is obviously aimed at the trainees, where we have a group of selected candidates who come in. Process is currently being changed, so I won't get into that. But long and short of it is they will come in on the day. They'll obviously meet some of their peers. Ultimately, they're all going for different opportunities, mostly because the day we hold in Norwich is for Lowestoft, Great Yarmouth. Um, even sometimes Thetford. So basically, you haven't got to worry about sat there and vying to the person next to you. It's look, we'd love somebody to be a grade A student, but that's not the be end all. And to be completely honest with you, if they were a grade A student and couldn't really hold a sort of a professional conversation with perhaps a client of ours, not necessarily with us, um, whereas somebody who perhaps only got C's, but they were fantastic and really could just bit of the gift of the gab, then we'd probably go for the latter. It really, it's not about that, and like you say, it's really more about the softer core skills. So I've done some assessment days, and people walk in and not the room brightens up, that's very cliche, but sometimes you can just tell that people come with a bit of an aura, a bit of positivity, with a smile on their face. We all have tough days and stuff like that, and that's natural. Our hope is that having HR in place, we can support with those pieces.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, for sure. Ultimately, it's very much to do with. I mean, look, you're representing Lovell Blake for our clients, and they obviously pay us to assist them. So ultimately, they're going to expect a certain level of expectation. Is if you would go for dinner at a restaurant, you would expect the
Yeah.
waiter to be on hand, positive, polite, because you're paying for his service to a degree. So I think that's just, and that's any industry, and that's why I see it as very, I don't want to say sales because it's not, but I see it very account management based, where you need to think about it from the client. Softer core skills could be commercial awareness. I always talk about this and think about, why does a business use Lovell Blake? You know, if they're paying us, what do they therefore expect? And I think if you understand that, you put the pieces in place to then know how to represent yourself and the business when you're working here, or any business for that matter. So yeah, it's certainly about being able to have a good conversation and listen, and use them perhaps not in that order, but yes, certainly listen to the client, and just be able to communicate. And that's really cliche, I know, and not helpful, but certainly key.
No, that's fantastic, and it's really interesting, Doug, because I say, like, one of the benefits of Employer Talks is breaking down some of those old stereotypes and first thoughts, which, as you say, sometimes people will think like, yep, you don't need to be a personal, but have a personal approach. You don't need to, as you say, have that ability to build rapport with people, light up a room. Some people just think like, oh no, you're good with numbers. You're fine there. So it's really interesting and insightful to actually hear, as you say, that there's actually a big demand for, as I say, those sort of softer skills and that ability to build relationships. And my final sort of question, sort of just to sort of round this chat up, is one, would you mind sort of just go over again about the opportunities to get into the organization? Because as you said you're filling up from November for the next year. And secondly, if you yourself had to give, if someone was sort of in front of you, whether a candidate, and they were to ask you, why do you think I should work for Lovewell or Blake? What would be, for your own experience, what would be your feedback and response to that?
Course. So timeframes. Our assessments take place for the. So let's talk about the AAT, the school leavers A level. The applications will open in October. They will then end up being in the assessment days in February. I think it closes in January time. So basically, during that period is when you want to keep an eye out on, I suppose, our socials, but also just the website. Everything will be online during that period. We do have occasional ad hoc roles, so if you're listening to this and you've fallen outside of that, please do go to the website anyway. And then for graduates, the day is actually in November. Opportunities open up in September. Again, it's an assessment day. The process will slightly be changing, so I won't go into that, but it's to be quite honest, it's quite straightforward. Don't worry, you don't have to apply for a site, put your CV on, and then go through all the application details like I know you do some sites. And then, do you know what? I say this to students all the time, is that if you're thinking about training for accountancy, we so last year we were awarded 20th best apprenticeship in the country.
Oh wow.
That's not just accountancies either. That's commercial businesses as a whole. That's going up against IBM, British Army. These are £1 billion systems. There's a lot of rubbish out there. Marketing, sales pitches, businesses telling you they're best thing since sliced bread. Look, every business could be better in certain ways, but I just say, if you're looking to do accountancy, there's a couple of reasons I would choose Lovell Blake. One, because of the training, and I think off the back of that is that, if you were to ever move on from Lovell Blake in the future, obviously you're supposed to be with us forever, but if you're ever to move on, it looks great on your CV because we're so well known, because of the history, because of the heritage. It'll look fantastic for your career aspirations personally. And secondly, because of how good the training is, I want to say that people are viewed quite favourably if they were ever to come from Lovell Blake. So I just personally think that, let alone we give, you know, the best training in East Anglia as an accountancy, we also will serve as better for you personally, which is why we've focused on it so much, I think, as a firm, because we know how important it is. And obviously I work at Lovell Blake too, so you know that's another key selling point. But yeah, so no, I would say the training's fantastic, and if you want to start your career in accountancy, genuinely, why would you do it anywhere else without sounding too salesy, really?